Awesome. Hi, everyone. So I think people will just be coming in over the next 2 minutes, but we can go ahead and get started. It's absolutely my pleasure to introduce Michael. Michael is one of the best world's regarded SEO experts. He's also an operating partner at Overton Venture Capital, an LP at Supernode Ventures. Extensive record as an entrepreneur. He founded Gossip Cop, and it's the first and only website to fact check entertainment news. Has a lot of experience with SEO, and thank you so much, Michael, for doing this workshop for us. We're really, really excited to learn, and I will let you take it away.
Totally my pleasure. There's going to be a little glitch here as I share my screen, but here we go. Yeah, I told you. See? I built you that logo.
That's awesome.
So thank you, everyone, for having me. And I was going to, are we on mute? Let me just start a little by saying who I am. As you noted, I did start Gossip Cop, which is a fact-checking company that was acquired by a private equity-backed media company. And I am in venture capital, as you mentioned. I've worked at places like Hearst, NBC, News Corp, and I took a relatively unknown Us Weekly and turned it into the brand that it is. I also produced the show Access Hollywood before I started Gossip Cop. Is there anything else that I'm forgetting? Oh yeah, that's right. As you mentioned, I am considered an expert on the Google algorithm and SEO, and I'm happy to talk about it. I've been invited to Google's offices on many occasions in both New York and in Mountain View to share my findings about certain vulnerabilities that they have. They were getting gamed a lot by a bunch of different sites, and I did some findings that I shared with them, how they were getting gamed and why unreliable search results were surfacing to the top. You'll probably notice on this slide that is me on Good Morning America and also on The View. And above it, you'll see that of the 30 million searches at one point for Brad Pitt, all 3 spots were owned by my company. So how did I do it? I did it through SEO, which brings us to tonight's subject. What is SEO and why is it so important? Well, for one, yeah. Sorry, do you hear me?
We can hear you. Oh, we can still hear you, but the audio became a little staticky.
Oh, okay. Is it okay now?
It's good now. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I was saying, what is SEO and why is it so important? Well, for starters, SEO is not magic, nor is it manipulation. You know, a lot of people think it is manipulation, but there are really no tricks involved. SEO, or search engine optimization, is simply how you improve the chances of your product, services, or content surfacing to the top of Google search results. And from its perspective, Google just wants to display the most.
I don't have video on.
Right? As I was saying, from Google's standpoint, they just want to display the most accurate, trustworthy, and best results on its platform. For many, SEO is also how you promote your business without paying for ads. And when SEO is done successfully, consumers feel that they've organically come to your product and that it's more reputable than something they would find by an ad. In fact, there are studies that show people are 13 times more likely to trust something that they found organically than they clicked on an ad for. So assuming everything is set up correctly from a technical perspective, your site will be crawled and indexed properly. Now, crawling is how Google reads your site. It's all the coding, the HTML, the Java, they read everything. An index is how it's displayed, what you see in search results. So your goal is to show Google that your site, your products, your services are high quality and worthy of displaying prominently in search results. And tonight we're going to go over what the search engine deems high and low quality and how to send those signals to Google, as well as a handful of other related ranking factors. But before we do the deep dive, it's important to note that good SEO takes time and is about being forthright and transparent with Google, and providing them with as many signals about your products or company so that the search engine itself can understand the value of what you're trying to promote. And then it will rank your site above all others in your own vertical. So in a nutshell, most of it is really about practicing best practices for Google, following their guidelines. And if you consistently follow their guidelines in these best practices, Google will, I'm sorry, the SEO is probably like the best bang for your buck. It's the most affordable and most efficient way to reach your customers, markets, or visitors. But it isn't something that you just implement and then leave it alone. Like everything else that's integral to scaling a business, you need to tend to it on a daily basis. It's much like a garden. So let's get to it. Google measures websites and individual pages based on more than 300 ranking factors. The more compliant you are with these guidelines, the more likely your site and its content will surface in search results. Now, we obviously can't get to all these these ranking factors tonight, and the vast majority, to be honest, are really not that crucial. But among the more significant ones, which we're going to discuss, are content quality, linking, and user experience. And user experience covers a bunch of variables such as page speed, page stability, ads, monetization, intrusive pop-ups, site security. Trust me, we're going to go over it, and it'll be very understandable. So, what does Google want? Well, ultimately, what Google wants is expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. While expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, or EAT, as it's known in Google's quality rater guidelines, are not ranking factors per se, they do align very much with what Google is looking for. And there's a lot of documentation on this, but simply, Google wants to simply surface results from sites and pages that are authoritative in their field, have repeatedly proven themselves to be trustworthy, and whose product or service is provided by verifiable experts. What you ultimately want is to have a website that exudes so much EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, that if Google didn't surface your site or product, they would be embarrassed. But even if you unquestionably have the best services or products or content, if you can't signal this to Google and help the search engine better understand your website and company, which is really the online barrier between you and sales and growth, then it's all meaningless. And in June, I did a conference for fact checkers around the world. It was a virtual conference. And I told them basically the same thing, that if you're debunking a big fake news story, if you're not practicing solid SEO, no one's ever going to see your fact check or know the truth. So it's really important that you follow these best practices so that your work can surface to the top. Before we get to quality, let's discuss user experience. I can't stress enough how important it is to pay attention to user experience, UX as it's known, because you want your users to have an optimal experience when visiting your site. If your site is difficult to read, hard to navigate, even has spelling errors, you'll never grow your audience, because readers are going to come once, feel it's low quality, and never return. Like I said, some of these factors also include spelling, grammar, punctuation. I know people think why, but there's a reason. We'll get to it. So, let's do it now. So, for instance, if you've got writing errors, such as spelling, misspelled words, or punctuation problems, basically, visitors will question your professionalism. They'll question your trustworthiness. And Google's machine learning is so highly sophisticated that it will pick up these clues and it will downgrade you for that as well. I've actually witnessed well-respected companies get dinged because they're sloppy with their spelling and punctuation. Now, some of you are probably thinking to yourself, why am I doing everything to satisfy Google? And the answer is not because it's the biggest search engine in the world by far, or that it can drive a tremendous amount of traffic and revenue to your business. And here's where I get accused of drinking the Google Kool-Aid. Hold on a second. Good. No. The reason you want to satisfy these criteria is because Google's guidelines, they're not capricious. And it's not a product of their engineers saying my way or the highway. It's none of that. Google tests, tweaks everything you could possibly imagine. And then they feed all that data into their machine learning. And as a result, the best practices that Google is advocating actually fully align not with what they necessarily want, but what they've learned visitors want and what ultimately makes for an optimal user experience. So in a sense, Google's doing the hard work of analysis for you. Now all they want you to do is implement it. So what makes for a good user experience? Well, your site must be optimized for mobile first indexing. The visual stability of your page is crucial as well. Page speed is very important. You don't want to disrupt your content with annoying pop-ups. And you can't crowd your content with one ad after another ad. And you have to make sure that your site is secure with HTTPS. Okay, so we're going to touch on each of these briefly. Whoops, sorry, I skipped one. Let me go back. Okay, sites must be optimized for mobile first indexing. So by spring of 2021, just a few months from now, Google will be crawling and indexing your mobile site first rather than your desktop site. And that's because the vast majority of people these days interact with and get their information, make purchases from their phones. Therefore, your mobile-friendly site needs to be top-notch, but it should also be the exact same content and functionality as your desktop, but they are going to read your mobile version first. Going back to visual stability is crucial. As you can see here, this is an example of me scrolling down USA Today. And you don't want a shaky experience. You don't want the page to shift to the side or jump around. And Google is actually making this in the spring part of what it calls its core web vitals. Page stability is going to be a ranking factor. Now, this has particular consequences. Let's say you're visiting an e-commerce site, right? And you've put something into your shopping cart, and then you decide, nah, you know what? I don't want this. But because the page is unstable, you may inadvertently click purchase. So Google is making sure that everyone has pages that when you scroll down, they stay static. Also, you don't want to disrupt your content. Actually, I skipped again. You don't want to disrupt your content with. We'll go to this. I thought that I had. The next one was. Let me see. Wait 1 second. Right. There. No. Okay. I must have lost one. But page speed is important. And this is one of what you see here, this page speed insights. This is one of the testing tools. For many of you, I'm sure you've opened a page at some point in your life and it was really slow. And that's a terrible, terrible user experience. You don't want to have to wait for a page to open. And so Google wants you to test your page speed, get it faster. And the reason they do this is they've actually found that there's a strong correlation between faster loading times and increased traffic and conversions. So it really behooves you to have a fast site because you will end up making more sales and have a better user experience. Let's see. This one, okay. So you don't want to disrupt things with annoying pop-ups. This one is from the New York Post. I have tried to advise them on numerous occasions to get rid of this. For the number of people who are going to sign up for their newsletter compared to how much traffic I believe they're probably losing because of this, it would make more sense for them to get rid of this newsletter. It's a negative ranking factor, and I think most of us find it very annoying when you're trying to read something in a thing like a newsletter or a special offer like that pops up. Another problem is over monetization. So there's one ad, there's second ad, third ad, fourth ad, fifth ad. Where's the content? There you go, in yellow. Okay. Yes, that's where it is. So visitors come to see products and services. They don't want to be bombarded with ads. And by the way, ads, the more ads you have on your site, it actually slows down your page. So not only are ads a bad user experience for the person, but it's also slowing down your site. So you're actually creating two negative ranking factors at once. And the thing that I always kind of find bizarre is that there's some people out there who think that if they put more ads on their site, they're going to increase their revenue. But if that were really the case, everyone would jam their sites with one ad after the other, and they would do it with impunity. And sometimes I hear from site owners, they say, well, this site gets away with it, so why can't I do it? 2 points need to be made. Now, maybe I tell them that their competitor has so many other incredible positive pointing ranking factors that maybe that one negative ranking factor of too many ads doesn't affect them as much. But more likely, it's that Google's algorithm hasn't caught up to them at that point, and eventually they'll get penalized by one of the core algorithm updates, which we'll discuss in a few. Lastly, you want to secure your site with HTTPS encryption as opposed to HTTP. Google has noted in the past that security is a top priority, and in an effort to create a safer internet, it wants HTTPS as a ranking factor. Now, here is me busting Google itself a few months ago for putting one of its own podcasts on an unsecured site. I, of course, was joking around with them, but they did put one of their podcasts on an unsecured site. And then two of their trends analysts and I joked about this. One of them said that they wanted other podcasts to rank higher. The other trends analyst from Google said that the $1 trillion tech giant couldn't afford the HTTPS certificate. But there is currently there's a workaround for this. There's what's known as AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages. And this is like an all-in-one platform that controls and to a degree ensures a better user experience, such as page stability and speed. And you can use AMP, but down the road, Google will let people control whether they want to do the core web vitals, the speed, the stability on their own. Let's though move along to some of the pitfalls you should avoid. So it's not necessarily a penalty, but you should avoid publishing what's known as duplicate content. And this can result in your pages being less visible, could easily push you back to page 2 or 3 of Google results. And the truth is, no one looks on page 2 or page 3 of Google results, except for maybe like an ex who's cyber stalking you. So what is duplicate content, right? Well, duplicate content generally refers to substantive blocks of content within or across domains that either completely match other content or are appreciably similar. Mostly, this is not deceptive in origin. Now, I think this is probably as good an explanation as you're going to get about duplicate content. How do I know? Well, because it is duplicate content. This is from Google's guidelines. Now, I don't believe any of you would willingly or purposely create duplicate content or take other people's content, but even for honest practitioners, tricky. And let me give you an instance where it gets very tricky. Quotations. Let's say, for instance, you include a big announcement that's made by a regulatory commission, for instance, on your website. It's quite possible when Google crawls your site and you're quoting that very public statement that your page will be viewed as duplicate content because other sites have that same public statement as well. And so your site will be moved below others in search results. That's, again, you're not trying to deceive anyone, but because so many people are using, let's say, a press release or a public statement made from a government official, that someone is going to have it marked as a unique content, probably the AP wire, and then everyone else will have a tiny, tiny little penalty for having it as duplicate content. So I posed this scenario to one of Google's trends analysts a few months ago, and the search team member acknowledged that it can get murky there when everyone has these same block quotes. And I said to them that our workaround when I had my old company was that what we would do is we would quote sparingly and we would paraphrase whenever it was feasible. And the search team member agreed that smaller, bittier quotes is a good tactic to help avoid duplicate content. So remember that when there's like a very public statement and you're putting it on your website, maybe you want to paraphrase it and just use shorter quotes. Also keep in mind not to repeat headlines. And that happens. That really does happen from time to time. For instance, it's not inconceivable that a business publication would run the headline, Fed's lower interest rates 2 or 3 times. So in an instance like that, you'll want to include a little more detail or maybe change the verbiage around a little. So maybe it would be like Fed's lower interest rate for second quarter straight, just to make it a little different, or again in 2020, something like that, just to differentiate the two headlines. So to recap, okay, never post duplicate content. Avoid using long quotes that are posted elsewhere. Don't repeat the same headlines. Never post duplicate content. See what I did there? 1 and 4? Okay. Now, another major potential pitfall is what Google calls thin content. This is a particularly large subject with a lot of nuances. So thin content is essentially content that's low quality, not authoritative, or offers little or no additive value to the visitor. It's kind of flimsy. And as a result, it ranks lower in search and has less visibility. Thin content is actually very widespread, and it's often what hurts most companies when there are algorithmic tweaks during the year, of which there are many. Now, Google doesn't ascribe a word count to thin content, but I can tell you anecdotally that on the success versus failure rate of the content on my old company, we fared far better in search when we wrote articles that were 400 or more words compared to when we wrote 100 words. Now, again, let me stress, Google doesn't base it strictly on word count. They don't. So there's no reason to be verbose, wordy, loquacious, garrulous, voluble, nor should you unnecessarily, pointlessly, aimlessly, or needlessly fill your stories, articles, posts, content with redundant or repetitive sentences, verbiage, or phrases. Get the picture? A lot of words, but didn't have much value, nor was there anything additive in there. So more succinctly, just say what you need to, but make sure you use enough words to fully exude expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. So if it's not based on word count, the question then becomes, why did our 400 word or sometimes even 1,200 word articles do better in search? And what we figured out after analyzing close to 30, 40,000 stories was that the longer articles we wrote corresponded with more visibility and traffic because those stories actually required more effort, more time. They had better reporting, more robust reporting. They also had more sourcing, more documentation than our shorter, more hastily put together pieces. So basically, the longer pieces, yes, they had more visibility by and large, but that's because we had so much more substantive information in those articles and they were higher quality. And content quality has been a real focal point for Google for nearly a decade now. A moment ago, I mentioned algorithm updates. So let's look at one. In 2011, Google introduced the Panda update to measure content quality. And over time, it's drastically changed the visibility of numerous websites. A lot of websites that had previously done very well got hit by the Google Panda algorithm and were decimated. The Panda update and its various iterations, because it has been tweaked over the years, lowers in search sites that it believes are poor quality and have lots of thin content and which don't exhibit that authoritativeness and expertise. The algorithm update was, by the way, named after this cute cuddly bear. That's false. It was actually named after a Google engineer named Navneet Panda. So if you're engineers out there, maybe one day Google will name an algorithmic tweak after you. So let's discuss linking now. Also, fairly broad subject, but tonight I'll just focus a little bit on linking practices and strategy. And these are best practices. So for ease, They're basically two types of links. There's do follow links and what's known as no follow links. And for simplicity, your internal links, when you link from one part of your site to another part of your site, those should have a do follow link. And by internally linking this way with the do follow link, you're helping visitors navigate from one section of your site to another, but you're also signaling to Google that there's a connection between these two pages, that they're not random, that you're giving them signals to say this relates to that. And like I said, Google is always looking for signals. Now, where it gets a little trickier is this no follow link attribute. And you use that when you're generally linking from your site to another site, an external site, a third party. And when you do the no follow, what you're saying is that it's related to what's on your page, but you don't want to give that other site, that third party, credit or what's known as link juice. Now, unfortunately, there are some major organizations, for instance, as a matter of practice, that only use no follow links when linking externally. So if you get a no follow link from a site that only does that, and frankly, a lot of news organizations do that, they're basically directing visitors to your site, but they're telling Google, well, we don't want to give that site because we don't think they deserve the ranking benefits, the link juice, or the credit that they deserve. It's, in my opinion, extremely petty. It's totally unfair, but unfortunately, it happens a lot. Now, that's not to say all is lost, right? So presumably, someone does a no follow link from their site to you. You should be still getting traffic from them. It's good for your brand awareness as well. And it's good that people will recognize that you got a link from a notable news outlet, even if the public doesn't know that they kind of gypped you with this no follow, no credit link. So as a general rule, I would suggest from your side to only use no follows when you're directing visitors to information to external sites that have general information that if it's not proprietary, there's no reason to give them a follow link. But if they do have something that's exclusive, you should absolutely confer them with that credit, that link juice that they deserve for their scoop. So let me just, for instance, by the way, like if you have, if you're linking on the bottom of your site to social media, which most sites do, they have their, Facebook page, their Instagram page, their Twitter account. They usually have that on the bottom. And what you should link to those using a no follow, because Instagram doesn't need your link juice. And also, it's not anything proprietary. So think about that when you're doing your linking. I want to now show you something from WordPress, which many people use. It's a content management system. It's how you publish. So this is an internal look at what it would look like for a do follow, an internal link. And you'll notice I clicked on the open link in new tab box. And so that opens, when you click on a website, that will open that page into a separate window. And I prefer doing that because you don't want to lead people from one section completely off the page to another section. You'll also notice right below that I didn't click the box that says rel equals no follow attribute because this is an internal link and you want that link juice to stay internal on your site. Let's look at now a no follow. Okay, so in this instance, I've clicked open in a new tab because you want to open in a separate window. And particularly when you're linking to an outside source, you definitely want to make sure you open in a separate tab, because if you don't, when the person clicks on that link on your site, they're going to be completely driven off your site to that third party site. And then you've lost them. So you always want to open in a new window. And if it's a third party that has general information, that it's not exclusive, it's not proprietary, click off that second box that says rel equals no follow. And that's the way you're telling Google, like, it's related, but this is an exclusive, and I don't want to give all my link juice, my credibility to another site. So as you can tell from all this talk, links, they have value. In my opinion, I like to think of links as currency. And if you get linked to by others, particularly respectable organizations, it will help the page rank of your own site, because it signals to Google that your site is a commodity that's valued by others. Getting links from others is sort of a big thumbs up, and it signals to Google that you're trustworthy, that you're authoritative. And the more links that you accrue from reputable outlets, the higher you'll surface in search on certain topics. And the best you can do to get outlets, to get links, frankly, because it's the decision of third parties to link to you, the best you can do is what Google likes to say: be awesome. And it's true. Just create awesome products, create awesome services, awesome content, and others will recognize it and they will link to you and highlight you. For the most part, though, external links will be from things like press reports, reviews, product reviews, hopefully satisfied customers praising your goods on their own blog or on their own social media pages. And Google is crawling the entire web and picking up these signals from other parties. So continuing this analogy of links being currency from your end, you have to then keep a careful eye on your link balance. Think of it also like a bank account. You don't want more links. You don't want to link out more than you have internal links. So you want to control this flow of links. You want more people to link to you than you giving out links. And so it's important that you link correctly and judiciously. Otherwise, you're going to end up diluting your own page or your site's value. Now, you can create a lot of links, but the more and more links that you create on your own site, in a way, you're diluting the particular link that you have on a page. So it's kind of like printing more and more money. It deflates the value of the dollar. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't have links, and many of them on your site, but don't link needlessly to things that you shouldn't have to. I've seen on many web pages where someone will link any product name on their site. They'll make a tag and link to it. You don't need to do that. You do that, you'll end up with 50,000 extra pages and links that don't have any value. So a moment ago, I said, remember that in particular, when you've got those social media pages, to link to them with an open window and with the no follow attribute. Now that I've gone over some of these aspects of link and linking, I'd like to just touch on how you should link to the text on your site. For the most part, the links that are on, you've seen this everywhere. It's underlined or the link is in a different color. So the visible words that are contained within those links in a different color or underline, that's what's called anchor text. And this is where a lot of people make big mistakes. And Google looks very carefully at this. So your anchor text should closely resemble the link that you are linking to, the URL that you are linking to. And it helps visitors with navigation and for Google to understand the context. So let's look at this one. This is an example of bad anchor text, linking to just one single word, like the word plan. And actually, this is from a recent Yale Daily News story. And this isn't best practices at all. Personally, I almost never click on a anchor text that has one word or two words because it feels spammy. And when it has a word like plan, I don't know really what or where that non-descriptive anchor text is going to lead me to. So a better practice, and here's from the Wall Street Journal, this is good anchor text. Let's look at this. So the anchor text here says, consumers boosted their spending in October. And if you, as you can see in gray with the arrow to the link, the Wall Street Journal is linking to another story they previously wrote, and the URL is consumer-spending-personal-income Corona-October 2020. And now look at the anchor text. So you'll see that the anchor text and what they're linking to, it mimics, right? Because you have those same words, consumers, spending, and October. Now you have a sense when you click on that, what you'll be getting. And Google really looks at that because they don't want you to have anything that's questionable or could be conceived as deceivable. Now, Google doesn't only reward high quality content, it also rewards content that's unique. So you want to always create unique content, and that includes images. And we're going to wrap up soon. I'm going to take some questions, but I do want to touch on images briefly. So unless you have a photographer taking exclusive pictures for you or dedicated designers creating unique one-of-a-kind illustrations, it's likely the artwork that you're going to have on your site is not unique. Ideally, what you don't want to do is use the same exact photo that everyone else does. Now, there are instances where you can't get around that, right? If there's a photo that's very specific to an event or a subject, you have to do it. But the vast majority of images are really not that specific or crucial. And I would suggest employing a tactic that we used when we meshed, when I had my old company. What we did was, if we were writing about two people, we wouldn't show that same picture of those two people that everyone uses. What we would do is we would mesh two completely unrelated pictures of those people from different times and places. And then by doing that, we were creating a unique image. And that would do very well in search because Google prefers uniqueness. So let's look at one example here. Let's say you're doing a story on Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump. Well, there are a limited number of photos of the two of them together. Sure, there's this. Okay, maybe I added a little artistic license, but there's little uniqueness or SEO value to this photo because this photo has been used hundreds of times or maybe thousands of times by at least hundreds of outlets. In fact, I did a Google search of that particular image without my little artistic license. So what I found was, and this is just a tiny percentage of the search that I did of this Google image. As you can see, Newsweek used this same image in May 2020. The Washington Post used it in November 2019. The BBC used it in June 2019. And if you look carefully at these headlines, you'll see that the same photos was used at different times for totally unrelated stories. So there's no reason to use that photo. You're not going to get any search, and it will certainly not make your content appear unique by using a photo that everyone else used. So this is the kind of thing that we would do. We would slam together two photos that have never been together before of, let's say, Trump and Kim Jong-un from separate times and places. Now, obviously, you've got to acknowledge in your photo credit that these are from different times, although I think if you look at the background, you can figure that out. But, we did this because this photo is unique and has never been seen ever before by Google's crawlers. So that's a great way to get search traffic on your photos as well. One last word about photos. So when you upload a photo to your CMS, your content management system, you'll have the opportunity to include what's known as alternative or alt text to the image. And what that is it generates a specific URL, a specific link to that image, as do all uploaded photos. Anytime you upload a photo, it creates a unique link. And that directly signals to Google how the picture is connected to the page that it's on. So the alt text 2 should mimic the basic premise or headline of what's on that page, the content. So let's look at one example here. In this example, the tabloid photo and the alt text both describe the story's subject, which is that the Queen supposedly is making Prince William the next king. By the way, that's not true, and it's not even possible. Succession goes by the next heir. So Parliament, but that's another subject for another time. So, so here you see that the alternate text is Queen dash Elizabeth, or you don't even really need to put the dashes in, but it will generate. And then up top, you'll see what Google sees. And basically, what I was doing there is I'm furnishing Google with information about the photo and, of course, about what the story is about. And you would do the same thing with products. And that way, Google better understands your site and what the photo is about and why it deserves to be in search. So finally, what would a presentation on SEO be without a nice flowery ending? So consider your website a garden. And much like a garden, it needs to be tended to day and night. And with around 10 algorithmic tweaks a day, or an estimated 3,600 changes a year, maintaining your site is mandatory. If you neglect any of it, weeds like thin content or duplicate content will pop up and will destroy your site and its ability to rank high in search. So instead, nourish your site with fresh content every day. Make it vibrant and high quality. And make sure that you follow the best practices in Google's guidelines so that your site, like a garden, is positioned in a good light. Finally, once you've planted all these good seeds of SEO, just sit back and watch your traffic grow organically. Thank you very much. And I would love to hear some questions.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was amazing. Yeah, I mean, I have a questions right off the bat.
Okay.
So for instance, say you're a site that doesn't produce too much content, or if you're, yeah, so you're a site that doesn't produce too much content. What are some ways to rank better on that? Or say you just have a product, but you're not producing content like Gossip Cop might have.
Right.
What's a good way to rank on that? And I think, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, so that's a great question. So, you know, the vast majority of sites are products, right? And what you want to do is obviously stick to all those guidelines, but you might want to create a blog on your site. And the reason you want to create a blog on your site in which you would post a story maybe every week so that Google sees that there's freshness to the site. You want to post that blog because that's a great opportunity for you to get what's known as keywords found. So let's say, you know, you've created a product, you know, it's a new electric battery for cars, right? You know, what do? Well, every week you write a new story about electric batteries for cars, and you find a different angle, but you make sure that the content in that story touches on those words that you want to come up and search for. And the more and more you do this, the more likely you will actually, over time, end up coming up in search results when someone's looking for electric car battery. Let me see some of the, can you go through the chat? I missed one or two. I can't hear.
Yep, there was one question. How can you talk about site architecture? How should one go about approaching site structure with the general page, varying services, products, etc., especially with potential landing pages in mind? Okay,
so one of the greatest pieces of advice given to me was someone from Google during the early days. Now, Google can't tell you specifically what's wrong with your site, but I went on a hangout with one of the webmasters at the time. And the best they can do is talk in vague generalities. But this webmaster gave me great advice. He said, why don't you look at what others in your sector are doing and use that as a roadmap to, particularly the ones that are surfacing high in search results, and use that as a roadmap for setting up the architecture for your own site. And, you know, to be perfectly frank, I did that. I looked at e-news, I looked at Us Weekly, and I didn't completely copy them, but I saw that the way that they had set up their sites and the way that they made their navigation really made a lot of sense. And there was a reason why they were rising high in search. And so I took the best elements from them and a few other sites, and I incorporated that in my site. So I would suggest looking at others in your sector, pick the best aspects of their sites, particularly the ones that are doing well, and modify them for your own.
One more question. Any more guidance on how to speed up the site? And I think maybe a follow-up to that. Are there any tools that you could recommend on maybe? I think there was like one that you showed.
Right.
I forgot what it was called, but
page speed insights, and Google has a measurement tool as well called thinkwithgoogle.com and do /page speed. Both of those. And what they do is they give you what's known as a waterfall, and it will break down specifically what your vulnerabilities are and where you're slowing up. Generally, what slows up a site is people are using high-res photos. And I would, by the way, suggest using large photos. They're more likely to surface in what Google has called Discover, which is another section of search. Most people can't really tell the difference, but use large photos, but compress them. But the page speed insights and think with Google /page speed, both of those will give you, they'll do a great assessment of your mobile site and tell you the places where you can make actionable changes.
Two questions.
Sure.
Can you mention a couple of the tools you use to track your progress, see if your changes are having the desired impact? So I guess in general, is there maybe a tool or anything that you use to monitor how well you're doing on these factors, or like that tells you if you're optimizing well for a certain factor, or if you have any couple tools like that you use personally?
You know, what I used mostly was Google Analytics. So that really gave me good insight. And Google has a thing called Search Console. And the two of them, those two Google products, will really give you a very good sense of what words how well you're ranking for certain words or certain topics. And that changes from day to day. So you can see that, let's say you were number 5 for cordless power tools, and then the next day you were 7, or you went up to 3, and you can sort of look back at your own content at that point and get a sense. But you also have to pay attention to what's out there in the market. If someone else introduces a new cordless power tool, well, there's going to be a lot written about it that day, but that will subside over time. So I would suggest those two. There are a lot of other products, like there's a thing called Moz, Screaming Frog. Those are good, but I'll be honest with you, those things often just tell you broken links, spelling errors, what keywords you should go after because you're not ranking for a specific thing. And the problem for me with that is, right, so let's say I own a pool company. If they tell me that I'm not ranking well for pool landscaping or whatever, like, what's my choice, right? What's my choice? What am I going to look for a keyword about hot dog stand? Like, you can do better if you use the word hot dog stand. That doesn't relate to what I do. So I don't love those tools, to be honest. I really like looking at my own Google Analytics and Search Console. And Search Console, by the way, will tell you what you have errors with, or what wasn't indexed. And you can really get a good insight if you pay attention to what you're doing, what worked and what didn't work. And then as you do it more and more, you become more finely tuned to, you know what? We keep doing well with this. Why don't we continue doing it? And the more and more you succeed at it, the more links you get, the more visibility you get, the higher you will continue ranking for that particular keyword.
Michael? I have a question. I
Sure.
asked a question at the top, which I don't think anyone can see now, but I wondered, I'm an architect and interior designer, and everything you say is great, but pretty much not useful for my world. Um, and not entirely, but we don't sell products, we sell services.
Right. So, and where are you located out of?
Manhattan.
Manhattan. Okay. So, one thing I would start off with, do you have a Google My Business account?
No.
Definitely do that. Start with a
What is
Google
that?
Google My Business. Okay. So when you look at search, when you're doing search results, usually they're all sort of on the left side, and on the right rail is either blank space or some module you'll see. And that module is generally a person's Google My Business. It's very simple to set up. You know what? I'll put my email in the chat afterwards and I'll help you through it.
Okay.
But so that's the first step. And you would list your business address, phone number, services. And the reason you want to do the Google My Business, and a lot of businesses, by the way, should do this, is that's one of those steps for giving Google signals about your business.
That we exist.
So that you exist.
Right.
And then, and I'll be honest, then, they're going to crawl everything. They're going to crawl LinkedIn, and they're going to see that you studied architecture. And if you've been written about, they're going to start making those connections.
Okay.
Have you been written about?
Yeah.
Okay. What I would do on your site is create a tab for press.
There is.
There is. And it opens in a separate window with you should do no follow links.
I don't know about that. I'll ask the woman who's working with me, but the no follow.
And do you have an About Us page that talks about you?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So those are all good things. So I think once you set up the Google My Business, make sure the site speed also is, and if you want, I'll look at your site, make sure you don't have thin content, because that's really kind of the killer for most people.
We have a ton of photos. I do lectures. I mean, I have, it's a very content. There's a lot of content.
So maybe, I'll do a deep dive for you, and we'll figure out what it is that's not doing it. Maybe a blog just to update it. I mean, I can understand with architects, probably there isn't a lot of new content unless you're uploading a recent project that you did.
But that kind of thing is, it's like once a year we have a new project kind of thing.
Right.
It's
right.
Not,
so
I mean, I do have an old blog that we're reformatting, and stuff like that. So
I would do that, and maybe leapfrog off other stuff happening in the industry where you, it's just an opinion piece where you chime in and what you think is, maybe some of those places that they were building on Central Park South are just ruining the landscape of New York, especially if you're on the south side of the park, looking across.
Especially if you're a New Yorker, period. They're horrible.
Yeah. Right. So I look at those buildings that they're building, and I'm like, wow, they've actually really. It used to be free and clear when you looked across Central Park, and now I've got to look at these, big buildings.
You can thank Mr. Bloomberg for those.
Yeah. So maybe you do that where you opine once a week, or just add content. I don't want it to make it a chore for you, but think about things where you could just write 400 words or so, get those keywords in, because Google will see there's new content when they crawl you.
And you want them on my page.
On your page, absolutely. In just a blog section.
Okay.
So on that note, there's actually a couple questions. So a couple good ones. Is there so two? Do you know if sites such as Wix are optimized for mobile sites? And kind of going off of that, is there a higher quality attributed to self-authoring a blog on a personal pace versus kind of on this topic, maybe posting on Medium or a popular blog space? Is there a benefit or like give and take there? And also kind of in relation back to, is it in these sites with like Wix and WordPress, are they already mobile optimized? Are they already mobile optimized?
I would always go with WordPress, and I kind of feel like Google is tipping its cards a little these days with WordPress. They now have a plugin. So you have a thing that's called your site map, and that basically pings Google what's going on your site. So whenever you update it or you add a piece of content, it pings Google and tells them, here's something new, which is very important. Shows that you're active. They have this plugin for WordPress. They don't have it for Wix. And I've been hearing just the more and more talks that I've been having with them or listening in on conferences, it just feels like they're trying to integrate more with WordPress. So I happen to like WordPress too. I think there's a lot of great functionality. I would think, listen, you can start off with Wix, but I think at some point, probably best to migrate to WordPress. And then building off that, so the question about Medium and stuff, it's best to have it on your site because you want the URLs to really be from you. Otherwise, it's a Medium page that's linking to you. That feels a little, I don't want to say deceptive, but it feels like it's coming a little less from you. I'm not sure, I know a lot of people, especially in the venture world, everyone always posts on Medium. I'm not sure why they just don't have a dedicated blog. Might as well keep it on your own site.
And I think one more, and if anyone has one, it'd be a good time to drop in the chat. SEO tips for driving traffic to a recording artist site where content is mainly images and audio, not as much commentary and text. And so I know you talked about the alt images and maybe even starting a blog with potentially each release, but any other comments or tips for that?
Yeah, I think, if you're going to have artists, there's probably a lot of opportunity to write about that artist and about their music. Here's their new single, or this is what people are saying about their album. I think there's really actually a lot of opportunity, even if it's in the artist description, to write new content below their photo and their name. So, you should probably think to add a little more robust content on the page. It doesn't have to be a blog, but it could be more about the artist. What I would, though, say is don't take anything that's been written about them elsewhere. For instance, I see a lot where people will use their LinkedIn bio on their About Us page. And the problem is it goes back to duplicate content. So Google is seeing this LinkedIn content that has the same verbiage on your website. You'll want to vary it, paraphrase it, rewrite it some way. And I would do the same for a recording artist. Come up with some stuff about where they grew up, what their musical influences were. There is opportunity just beyond their name and the fact that they've released a new song to have fresh content.
And I think this is the last one. So this is about anchor text. Is anchor text so the question is anchor text okay as long as it's descriptive? Is it okay if the anchor text is informative or long, but not mimicking the URL versus being having those keyword matches with the URL?
Well, it shouldn't be too long, right? But 5, 6, maybe 7, 8 words. It doesn't have to mimic exactly, but probably you'll want the words to the left and to the right of it, at least to mimic it, if not those specific words. And that goes to BERT, which is part of their new machine learning. BERT picks up what's to the left and to the right to give everything context. So it doesn't necessarily need to mimic it, but it should explain to an extent. Like, just imagine that you're the visitor and you're clicking. Are you going to know before you click sort of what this is about or not? And if you don't know, then your anchor text isn't good. But if you have a sense of what you would get once you click, then the anchor text is fine.
Oh, last one. Does Google's algorithm place importance on how filled out the meta tags of the content or post are?
Yes. Okay. So that goes a little more deeply. And I was thinking of, do I get into the, so your meta tag, usually a lot of these sites have internal fields in which you plug in what's known as your meta title tag. It's the same, well, it should be. Your meta title tag is what shows up when you do search. You'll see something, and it should theoretically be the same as your headline. If you don't fill it in, it will probably be the same as your headline, unless Google's machine learning thinks that your headline has nothing to do with what you put for the meta title tag. But it is best to, whenever you have opportunity, to give them more signals. So your headline, the URL that's created, it's known as a permalink, your meta title tag, the alt text for the photos, all of those should basically give the main premise and what would be in the first paragraph of description of your product or services. They should all be pretty much the same. And that gives Google all these separate signals that says, okay, this is what this company is about, or this is what this product is about.
Awesome. I think a very quick one right before we wrap up. Any preferred compression format for high resolution images to assist with speed?
No, I mean, you know, whatever you've got probably pre-installed in your computer works. They always give you that sort of option of doing it medium, and medium is generally what you want to compress it to.
Well, that wraps up everything. Thank you so much, Michael, for everything today. This has been extremely helpful.
Let me put my email in here. If anyone has other questions or needs specific help with their site, this is what I love doing. And I got to tell you, it was a real pleasure. Thank you guys. I really appreciate the Yale Entrepreneurial Society inviting me. And again, if there's anything I can do to help you guys, my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Michael. And hope you have an amazing day. And thank you everyone for coming today.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.